All right, I think we are live, and I am so excited to be here. Hang on, let me just get things a little bit adjusted to make sure that we're all ready for the next hour and a bit, talking about love, talking about moving from whole heart, well, actually from heartbreak to whole heart. And I'm so glad I'm here, giving you an opportunity to talk to you about this work that is really growing and is absolutely taking a whole new face. So welcome to LoveLab, from Heartbreak to WholeHeart. My name is Joelle Leyden, and I'm a love coach. I'm really excited to be here, and I have a lot of content to cover today. And so if you have any questions, if you have any comments, please make sure that you type them in. I should be able to see them and answer them for you straight away. And that way we can have more of an interactive kind of an environment where we can exchange ideas and I can answer things for you. So want to start today. Let me give you a sense of where we're going to go. I'm going to give you, first of all, an opportunity to find out like how this work got started for me, who I am, and then I really want to talk to the fact that you are really not to blame for perhaps being in a place where you're struggling with men, or struggling in relationships at all, with even if it's all kinds of relationships. It doesn't matter if it's with a man or with a woman or with a partner. So I want to really address the reasons why perhaps you're not to blame for that. But once I tell you, you will become responsible for making changes around that. Then the next thing I'd like to talk to you about is the roadmap to love. And understanding that there's actually a roadmap that you can follow that will allow you to identify yourself, to figure out where you are in your life, and to recognize, in fact, that you're actually on the perfect journey in the absolute perfect location for your life. And so the last thing that I'd like to talk to you about is, or share with you, is a tool that I think you can take into your lives, and it'll change the way that you're in relationships with men altogether. But this is actually an opportunity for me to give you some information, to give you an overview of a 6-week course that I teach here live in the upstate New York area. So for those of you who are from upstate New York, this is, would be perfect for you. It most likely will become a teleseminar or a webinar in the near future. I'm working on that particular piece, but a lot of the content that I will cover tonight will speak to that piece. So, well, I guess let's begin. My name is Joelle Leyden, and I call myself a love coach. I actually went through a whole bunch of different phases of what to call myself, and that's really where I've landed. And if you had asked me even 2 years ago, whether I'd be doing this kind of work, or if you could tell me that that's the kind of work that I was going to be doing, I would have just laughed you out of town. I was coaching, but I was coaching women around their careers, around their choices in their own work, and helping them transition from one job to the other. And that felt like a really comfortable place for me to land. And I stayed there for a while. But about 2 years ago, my work changed. And it became much more centered and much more focused on relationships, particularly relationships with men. Although I believe that my work can apply to all kinds of relationships. So I was not your poster child for a relationship coach. I was actually the poster child for a codependent person. And so had you told me that I was going to be doing this work 2 years ago, I would have laughed you out of town. So the story begins from early on. I grew up in an environment that was not particularly helpful, a little bit abusive. We had mental illness in my family, alcoholism. it didn't really set me up for having a it didn't set me up for having a solid self-esteem. In fact, it set me up for having a very small self-esteem, which then when it came time to actually marry, I chose a man who would continue the same kind of pattern and continue the work that my parents had started. And that was an abusive relationship, and I stayed with him. And so anyway, long story short, I kept marrying. Well, I only married once, but I married once, and I was in a really long-term relationship with another individual. I didn't really date a whole lot, but I kept like finding a man and then marrying him, or finding the man and moving in with him and blending my family with him. And so they turned out to be very long, drawn-out experiences. So finally, when my life kind of fell apart after the last significant relationship that I had, I decided I was done. I was pretty much like done with men. I had to really make some changes around that for myself. And when I really reflected upon it, I realized that the common denominator on all these relationships was me. And so I recognized that there was something that needed to shift in me, because even though at that moment I didn't particularly want to be in another relationship with a man, I knew that that was not going to last a long time, that it really was my desire to be in a relationship with someone really special. And so I decided to change my perspective, to do my work, to really dive deep into reading and workshops and seminars, and really doing a lot of introspection work to uncover the kinds of beliefs that I had around men and around relationships in general, recognizing that there was something wonky in them that was just not lining up. And it was attracting and it was bringing into my experience the kinds of men that were just not really helpful to me at all. And so that was really the beginning of my journey back in 2010. I remember being in an audience at a workshop with my mentor with about 250 women, where at this audience there were about 50 men on stage who had just been brought in randomly. And the women in my group were allowed to ask any question that they wanted to of them and have them answered honestly. And I remember sitting in the audience and listening to the answers that these men gave, thinking to myself, well, they must have talked to each other before they got there, because nothing that they're saying is actually computing with my beliefs around men in the first place. And my beliefs were really that men were pigs. They were not to be trusted, that they were vindictive, that they were emotionally unavailable. And I had a whole list. I'm sure many of you have very similar lists. You wouldn't be here if that weren't the case. At least some sort of belief that is really interfering with your ability to be in relationship in a wholehearted way. So I remember thinking, maybe it was unconsciously at that time, but recognizing that what they were saying was very different from what I understood men to be like. And I saw them, or I heard men who were being honest and vulnerable and sweet and wanting to be of service and provide, and wanted nothing than that a woman be happy and that he be the one to make her happy. And so I set off to do research. I set off to prove what was in my head to be wrong, and to prove that what was on that stage to be right. And so I started dating many men, and just for the purpose of research. And I actually was very, very transparent about that with all the men that I dated, letting them know ahead of the game, listen, I'm not interested in a long-term relationship. This is where I'm at. I'm really looking to change some beliefs around men in general and about relationships. And this is going to give me an opportunity to just to do that. Would you help me out with that? And they were all so wonderful and willing to help me with my research. And from that, I started blogging about it, writing the story around this. And so long story short, I met the man of my, I don't know, I want to say the man of my dreams. I'm not sure if he was the man of my dreams. He certainly wouldn't have been the kind of person that I would have pulled off or seen in a bar and go like, oh man, that's the one. But I ended up with a really, really special man. And we're in the most amazing relationship that I've ever experienced. And so he bubbled up to the surface, and my relationship is still research And it is from that and the template, and I actually use my relationship with him as a template that I, for my teachings. So that's in a nutshell, a very long nutshell, albeit, was how this work really came about. I didn't start off thinking that that was the kind of work I was going to do. I didn't start off believing that I had the capacity or the bandwidth or the ability to be in a relationship with a man that was wholehearted, engaged, fully engaged in the relationship. And I did all the work necessary to be able to be in that kind of relationship. So I actually teach it now. Because I kept track of my data, because I've logged, because I did all of this research, it made it very easy for me to be able to teach what I learned. And I continue to use my personal relationship, as I said, as a template for this work. So it continues to evolve and change. So as we are in relationship longer and longer, my work is changing into, right, so how do you meet the man? And then how do you do that beginning dance with a man? And then now it's more into how do you sustain that relationship, that level of intimacy and trust and respect and love that you're looking to, despite all the ups and downs and all the rocky bits and pieces, all the rocky bits that life will throw to you. So that's really how this work began for me. And I'm really proud to be doing this work. The women that I've worked with have committed to changing their beliefs around the men that they've dated, or around their concept of partnership, around their level of honesty and ability to show up transparently and genuinely in a relationship from the very beginning. And so they've been able to co-author and co-create amazing relationships, marriages. And I'm really proud to have played a part in my clients' success and their continued success in their relationships. So that gives you a little bit of some background of how I ended up here. So I want to first and foremost speak to the idea of not being to blame, that women aren't really to blame for being stuck in their limiting beliefs, in their struggles around their relationships with partners. And I'm going to go through just sort of a list of reasons. I just dropped a pen. I just went through a list of reasons, but we're going to start with the very first reason, which is the myth that we're fed from a very young age. And that's the sort of like the Cinderella myth and the Snow White myth and the Sleeping Beauty myth, that we are going to meet a Prince Charming, and only then will we awaken, if we will. So we fall asleep. Snow White fell asleep, right? Cinderella didn't have a full life. She was cleaning her stepmother's home, so she couldn't become a woman until she could meet her prince. And Sleeping Beauty, well, she fell asleep also. So, and it wasn't until they got these kisses from these men that their lives could change. And Disney has fed us a continual diet of this kind of myth. My impression is that that diet is beginning to change, and it's nice to see that. But in the meantime, those of us who are in our 30s, 40s, and 50s who are fed a steady diet of this are kind of stuck. And even though we're independent, we have our own jobs, we have our mortgage, we make our car payments, and we're very self-sufficient. If you were to actually really be honest with what you truly want, it would be somebody that could take care of you. You would want a Prince Charming. And recently I had a woman in my workshop said, well, but I don't need somebody. I don't need somebody to protect me. I don't need a Prince Charming. And I said to her, well, would it not feel safer to be in a car in a seedy neighborhood with a strapping man than it would be to be on your own? And yeah, that's true. So I think it's not PC to say it, but I think many of us are still stuck in that belief that until we find Prince Charming, or until we find our Mr. Right or the one, that our lives, that we will remain asleep and that we will come alive when that happens. And so that creates a lot of struggle. It creates a lot of stress. It creates both stress on us, and then also think about the men. I mean, like, they have to show up on these white horses, and like, poor guys, some of us just would rather they die on the white horse than they show their vulnerability and their true heart. And so it really makes for a messy, sticky situation on both accounts. So that would be one of the reasons that we're not to blame, because we got these messages very early on in our formative years, where the beliefs, sort of subconscious beliefs, were established. This is before age 7. And so to really change those beliefs, it makes it really difficult. And they show up in, in stressful situations. Our beliefs will show up in stressful situations in the form of like the talk that we have going on in our heads. So that would be like one of the reasons that we're not to blame. Another one of the reasons is that historically, if we kind of go back to before around World War II, when many, many men went to war and women were left behind to take care of the families, but also many women actually went to work for the cause. They worked in factories, they took care of things, they found themselves being of really strong service and of value to this huge cause in World War II. And so they really found an opportunity. They found this opportunity to gain some inner strength and purpose. And when the war was done and men came back, they came back to their jobs and essentially sent women back to the home, saying, "Thank you so much for holding the fort while I was away. You can go home now." And then it started this really crazy 1950s craze of having these amazing houses and kitchens. I don't know, I'm probably dating myself, but I remember seeing those kinds of ads where, you have these crazy, crazy pants kitchens that were supposed to help women's lives. It was supposed to make things easier. And the truth of the matter is that, women had just had a number of years where they didn't have things easy. And they really appreciated not having things easy because they had a sense of purpose and they had significance. And when they were placed back in the kitchen and told, like, well, let's make your life easier, we're going to create all these things for you, and you can make your families happy, and you can make your husbands happy, and okay, so now you're delegated back to this small place. It made women very angry. And it is from that place that the movement in the 60s grew, where women got really angry and really dissatisfied. And you see all those pictures where they're burning their bras, and there's this whole movement of women saying, we're just as good as men. And what happened in this is that women, yes, were independent. They could do things. You have TV shows that, the Mary Tyler Moore show. They're like Rhonda. There were all these shows from the 60s that were showing women as being much more independent. And but the fact is that they became more like men in their anger, and they lost their sense of femininity. And this anger didn't really go away because they shot themselves in the foot. Because if they're going to be independent and self-sufficient, and if they're going to be married to men or be involved in relationships, then there was this cultural expectation that they were to bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan, and never let their husband or partner forget they were a man. So they had to be all things to all people. And I think that in our culture, that still exists today. So we still carry the anger that began in the 60s. And many women would not admit to this, but they're very angry. And it's a very long history that we carry inside of our bodies, inside of our psyche, inside of our culture, that we continue to hold to be true, that does not allow us to show up in relationships fully, because we're just really pissed off. And men sense that. There is no way to be in a relationship wholeheartedly, fully engaged in your sense of, worthiness, if you're really, really angry. There's also no way of being able to be present to another person, a partner, a significant other, if you don't have the ability to see them, because it's filtered by anger. So that's going on. And, many of you listening may say, well, but I'm not angry. I'm not angry. And I would actually challenge you on that one. I have found that the nicest people, myself included, tend to be the angriest. And there is no outlet really in our culture, appropriate outlet for us. There's no space for us to give that anger voice. It's as if we have this beautiful instrument that we could play, but we're only allowed to strike 4 notes, and that's it. And that makes us really frustrated. So the reason you may be experiencing frustration is because you may be carrying some of that in you as well. I can tell you that if your beliefs are that men are pigs, or they're not to be trusted, or like they never do anything right, or they never listen to you, or they're emotionally unavailable, if you're holding any of those beliefs, then I can, with fair certainty, say that you're probably angry, but you're not to blame for the anger. So we've got the first piece. We talked about the myth that we're fed. We talked about sort of historically where we're at. And then we can talk about also the myth of the in-love experience. And that shows up in the movies, in books. And what do I mean by the in-love experience? When you first meet someone and you fall in love, right? It's as if whereas before your life could have been like horrible, shitty, your love tank was just beyond empty. And you meet this person, and you fall in love, and your love tank is completely full, and the birds are singing, and like everything is beautiful, and like your life feels full and complete, and you're alive. The truth of the matter is the physiological response to falling in love, or to being in love, is that you're on an oxytocin high. And it's very, very difficult. This is a hormone that is considered a bonding hormone, right? So you're on this oxytocin high, which women tend to get. We get oxytocin released when we have orgasm, and it bonds us for a while to the person that with whom we had sex, or who helped us with the orgasm. And so the trouble happens when you fly high on that in-love experience. And even in that time, you may have had friends that say to you, but did you notice this about him? And like your mother warned you against him, or your best friend says, but I noticed this and that and the other, you need to watch out, and you can't hear it. And then you start to fall out of love, right? Out of love. And it could be out of that in-love feeling. And you could just be falling into just love. We are so fed the marriage is about being in love the whole time. Being in relationship is about being in love the whole time, as if that oxytocin high could last until death do your part, until happily ever after. And that's not true. But that's what we see in the movies. We see the story of the guy and the girl who have all these misadventures, and then finally they end up together, and then everything is tidy, and there's a beautiful little bow put at the end of the story, and then that's where we're left. Very rarely do we see the part where they get married and they have children, they have dirty diapers in the house to clean, and they're both working and they have no time and they're exhausted. And like, how do they even deal with being in a relationship with each other? So there's nothing out there that teaches women how to not just find a man and to be in a relationship with a man from the very beginning, but how to sustain that. And so when we fall out of the in-love experience, we think, well, this is no good. Like I'm not in love anymore. And so then we need to break up. But you're just at a very different place. So again, you're not to blame. There's not enough information out there for women around these cycles, these waves. This is all part of a roadmap. And then finally, there's this, when we think about being in a relationship with men, I sort of want to put you back to prehistoric times and to our very, very basic sort of animal, primal way of being. Men, even if a man is the same size as you, men are bigger and stronger. A man your size could still take you down. So they're kind of scary, but we need them for protection. And so many of us would want the one or a Mr. Right because it would make us feel safe. And so what we do is, in order to get the one, we will go on dates with men that seem like they have potential, okay, a dangerous thing, potential. But they seem to have potential, and in that potential, we begin to censor what we say to them. We'll only reveal only so much of what we say. We perhaps sell them a bill of goods. Maybe we only, maybe we just do some false advertising. Like maybe you wear an outfit that you would never wear in a million years just because it's a date. Or maybe you do something with your hair that you never do just because it's a date. You want to make a good impression. And I'm not saying that this is a bad thing, but what we do is that we don't show up authentically, and that we don't show up honestly and genuinely. We're not transparent from the very beginning. And so we lead guys on because we are afraid that he could be the one. He could be Mr. Right. He could be the perfect soulmate that you've been looking for. And so, and if he is, we're afraid that if we show like our entire heart, like we open this up and we show our entire heart, that they're just going to run away. And so there's a lot of manipulation, a lot of strategy that goes on for us as women when we're dating. But again, if we're not aware of these things, we're not to blame. So I've mentioned a lot of areas in which, women are not to really blame for their struggles. Because in this last piece, I want to add this one more piece to this, in that if you're not showing up authentically, okay, I'm going to give you a story. I think that'll be the best example. So I met with a friend of mine who, and I hadn't seen him in a long, long time. His wife died. He's a widower, and he's such an amazingly wonderful man. And we were catching up over coffee, and I was telling him about the work that I was doing, and he was so excited for me. And he told me the story about being in a relationship with a woman for 5 years, and how wonderful it was and how active they were together. And then he was just so in love with her. After his wife dying, this was such a big deal for him that he decided that he wanted to marry her. And so he asked for her hand in marriage. And he told me that the moment that he did that, she completely changed. It was as if he was with a very different woman. And I let him know. I said, this is normal. So they actually broke up. Things didn't turn out well. But I let him know that this is what happens with many, many women when they're dating and they're looking for a partner. That they won't be genuine, they won't be sincere, they won't be honest and transparent because they're afraid that there's a part of them that is not right, that if they show their true selves, that this potential relationship just won't even happen. And so from the get-go, the relationship is doomed because it's based on lies. It's based on censored information. It's based on best behavior, right? And so I don't want to lay blame anywhere, but I just want to make you aware of the fact that we do this. We want protection. We want to be in a committed, soulful, mature, sexy relationship, and we'll do whatever it takes. Except it doesn't really work. If you're looking for a committed relationship that is based on honesty, trust, and respect, and love, of course. It's like a three-legged stool. So, but we don't have tools. Women have not been taught, and our mothers were never taught. And so the information on how to be in a relationship with a partner that you'd like to be able to call your soulmate, your better half, has to be learned by other people who've had experience, mentors. And so I'm really glad that you're here so that I can give you a little bit of insight into that. So we've talked about why you're not to blame, okay? Because we've got these myths going on, we've got anger going on, where we don't show up authentically when it comes to dating, and therefore we don't build authentic relationships from the get-go. And so all these things make it so that we're actually not really to blame. But I am going to say this. Now that you know this, you're now responsible. I'm going to repeat that. You're not to blame, but you're responsible. You now know that you may have been acting in certain ways, that you may have been holding yourself back, that, all right, historically, these things have been going on, but now that you have this information, you can actually begin to make change, and you can make different choices, and you can commit to yourself in a very different way. And so when I use the word responsibility with my clients, sometimes they'll get angry with me because they're still in that myth of like, well, he should know. I shouldn't have to go and do all this work so I can be in a proper relationship with a partner, the partner that is meant to be with me. I shouldn't have to do all this work. I shouldn't be the responsible one. But the truth of the matter, if you're expecting somebody else to do the work on your behalf, then you're going to keep yourself stuck. So yes, you are responsible. So I'm going to switch gears with you here, and I want to talk to you a little bit about a roadmap, the roadmap that you might be finding yourselves on. Because there's a logical structure to the way that we lead our lives and to the way in which we are in relationships with men. And so Joseph Campbell talked about the hero's journey. And this is very, very masculine model, but has been used and applied to women, but it doesn't particularly apply. So let me just sort of back up the truck and give you a sense of what that is. So the hero's journey is about, this mythological character, but this can really be applied to your own life. A particular character who wakes up one day after living a very normal life, right? And they hear a calling. There's something that there's a quest they're meant to go on. And so either they heed the calling or they choose not to, but the calling comes back. Because if you're meant to go on a calling, you're meant to go on a calling. So they go and they take this journey on their own, but they do meet mentors and they meet guides along the way. And they slay dragons and they go through horrible messes. And then at the end, they find the chalice, they find the prize, they find the treasure, and then they can return home with this treasure. Right? So that's sort of like a very simplified version of this. For women, it's somewhat similar, but not. Our heroine's journey is a very different concept. For starters, it does begin the same way. We lead our lives and everything's okie doke, okie dokie, everything's fine, going to work. And then you wake up one morning with a thought, I'm not as happy as I should be, or maybe I keep having these little accidents, or keep feeling sick, or all the, maybe something's just not quite right. Or maybe if you're in a marriage or in a committed relationship, you've got this feeling that something is just not quite right. But you choose to ignore it. You choose to ignore the calling. It's like, ding, ding, phone rings. I'm not going to pick it up. I'm going to ignore it. I know it's for me, but I'm going to ignore it. Continue to lead your life. And the calling gets louder and louder and louder. So for a woman, that might take shape in the form of a crisis, an illness, a divorce, a bankruptcy. I'm having trouble pronouncing that word. Getting fired from a job. And so it starts a woman's journey into exploration. And this is an internal exploration. So unlike a man who's a very much sort of focused, outward focused, I'm not saying that there's not introspection going on for them. A heroine's journey is very much an inner trip. It's an inner, it's a reconfiguration of her inner landscape. And the call is an opportunity to make change in a part of her life that is not working anymore. And it could be, in this case, in your love life. So you decide to listen to the call and you decide to do some work. And maybe you're in this really horrible, horrible, sad place. You're feeling depressed. You're feeling saddened. You've been devastated. You've been shamed. And so begins this journey for you. To get through this journey, you too, as a woman, will need mentors and guides. But in addition to mentors and guides, women need a community of women, of like-minded women, I call them your clan, to help you along the way. Women tend to think that when they're in a crisis, when their lives are falling apart, when there's a divorce looming, when there's a breakup that was just had by the love of your life, that they need to suffer in silence, that there's shame in admitting that they're falling apart. And that is the worst thing that women could actually do. The best thing that they can do is call in their community. And so it's a very different piece, right? So calling in their community. And so they begin to become your mentors and your supports, along with a guide that can really help you stay committed to the process for yourself. Because you know that if there was a calling, that your life after this journey, this portion of the journey, will be completely changed. And you're invited to slay the dragons, but they're not outside of you. They're your inner demons. And they could be the dragons around your worthiness. So they could be your dragons of worthlessness. They could be your dragons of lack of confidence. They could be your dragons of not enough. And you get an opportunity to slay those, to wrestle with those, witnessed by a community. And you get to be held in the arms of that community until you're come to the other end, not with a chalice, not with a treasure, not with something external, but with you, a very new and different person. You standing in your life in a very different way. You with a fuller, more whole heart, more engaged in your life and in love from a place of worthiness. And so each time that we have these, that we get these callings, because it doesn't just happen once, it's constantly happening, that we get these signals, these signs that tell us change things. Every time that we say yes to going through that, and that we find ourselves in a different part of the roadmap. Okay, so I fell apart. I'm in my falling apart part of the roadmap. I got the calling. And so, or I'm in the yes, I said yes to this and it feels like shit. Or I'm on this place of like, I feel like shit, so I need to like lean back on my girlfriends. And then I need to receive their support. I need to receive from them. I need to take care of myself. So there are all these different places on the roadmap. I need to feel safe slaying my dragons. I need to have my hand held by a particular guide, a mentor. But all of this requires commitment on your part. And if we continue to believe that somebody else has the answer, that the answer is in another piece of clothing, in another drink, in another, hour spent on Facebook. And if we spend our time numbing ourselves, then we can never actually really and truly grow into the mature and kick-ass women that we're meant to be in this lifetime. We remain victims. And so the roadmap is an opportunity for you to recognize, like, where am I on this map? And what do I need to do to move myself to the next place in order for me to grow into that full, wholehearted woman that I desire to be, who is worthy of being in a relationship with another that is soulful, that is sexy, is respectful, trusting, honest, loyal, loving, all of those things that you're looking for. Intimate. What does intimacy require? It requires vulnerability. And vulnerability is not weakness. Vulnerability is actually where your greatest strength lies. And if you can have an opportunity to be vulnerable with like-minded women, and you can share your true heart, then you get to practice the skills with them that you would want to have in a relationship with another. And so your community becomes your place of research, right? It's a place where you try things out, you test things out, you track how it went, how it goes, you tweak it if it doesn't work, and then you can take it out into your love and into your life. So I'm hoping that gives you sort of a roadmap, and we talk about that a lot more in the 6-week course that I'm doing starting October 4th here in Albany, New York. So for those of you who are local, I would love to have you in the class. It's taking place at the Good Karma Studio on 3 Vetrano Road in Albany, New York. And what I'd like to do next is to give you sort of an overview of the work that we do in that particular workshop, in that 6-week series. And I'm really excited. My cat is outside screaming at me. I'm like, where did that come from? Why is he out there? Doesn't he know the door's open? He can help himself to coming in. Anyway, that was just an aside. Hang on a second. So we begin our 6-week journey sort of delving in to loss. It's probably not the most pleasant place to start, but in offering this class before, I always sort of bypassed that piece, which was the piece of grieving what you've lost in the past, giving yourself an opportunity to recognize that some of the anger that you're actually maybe feeling might be grief, might be hurt. And in our first session together, we get an opportunity to explore where it is that you're still feeling tender, giving you tools and an opportunity in a really supportive, like-minded community, an opportunity to be transparent and share some of that and feel supported and receive the love and support of your community, or your budding community, at least in the workshop. And it's an opportunity not just to have an opportunity, well, it's not just an opportunity to grieve. It's an opportunity to begin to look at what were some of the expectations that you had that were not met. How was it that you showed up? How is it that you would like to show up? And we begin the journey actually in the next couple, in the sessions after that, we begin the exploration of what were your patterns? What are your beliefs around men and relationships? I don't look at the strategy piece. I don't look at how, okay, I'm going to give you a tool, and then when I give you this tool, this is going to work. Because I don't feel that tools on their own work. I believe that changing and rewriting the scripts that we have in our heads before we are given the tools are actually what is sustainable and more efficacious and a more lasting way to be in the world and to find the kind of relationship that we're seeking. It's akin to the idea that if your idea of your ideal person, the ideal partner that you'd like to be with, is like somewhere up in the penthouse, say, but your beliefs about yourself are maybe somewhere around the, I don't know, the third floor. So even though you'd like this guy in the penthouse, you believe that no man would ever really, and no man in a penthouse would ever like be in relationship with you, or no man in a penthouse would even like look at you, or like all the good ones are taken, so like what's the point? Or I'm not really worth it. I don't think that I'm capable of being in that kind of relationship, or nobody will choose me, or all the good ones are taken, or I could go on and on. But I think you get an idea of what I'm talking about. So if your beliefs are not really aligned with the desire that you have, then there's no way on God's green earth that you will ever, ever, ever be able to meet the person that you're desiring to meet. In fact, it's quite possible that this person is already in your circles. And so until you take this archaeological dig and really dig and explore what are some of the beliefs that are actually maybe subconscious. We go into some of the beliefs that came from your being, the beliefs that were formed in your family of origin, and how they play out in your lives and in the relationships that you've had so far. And then we begin to actually look at the scripts that were written as a result of having those beliefs. And then we look at how do we start to, like, if the beliefs that we had did not work, then how can we rewrite those beliefs so that we have something that actually supports us and sustains us and allows us to show up in the relationship firmly believing that we're worthy of what we want. And so we get a chance in the 6-week session to rewrite that script and to get clarity on what is it exactly that we're looking for in a partner, and not making it a list. Because I know there are many, many women who are out there, they're making a list. This is in my list. And if that man doesn't, and if the man or the person that they're dating that day, on the second date, they don't meet the components on that list, then it's just like, okay, they're out of there. So we don't rewrite a list. We actually look at the feelings that you'd like to have and what kind of a person would be able to engender those. So it's a different way of looking at the desires that you might have. We also talk about how in the 6-week workshop, we talk about how to enter into dating, being honest, vulnerable, and transparent from the very, very beginning, which scares the shit out of women. Like, are you kidding me? If this guy happens to be Mr. Right, if I tell him the truth, he'll never want to be with me. And the idea is to get you to a place where you recognize that you're actually doing yourself and him a disservice by not being honest and truly transparent and sincere and genuine with him from the very beginning, because you create a relationship that's based on a lie. And so I teach you how to, once you've sort of moved those beliefs around and you're starting to practice new beliefs, how then do you find the courage to start dating again, or to be in the relationship that you're currently in a more genuine and honest and transparent way? And that takes a lot of courage. That makes women go, gulp, I want out of here. I don't even want to do that. But I've done a lot of exercises with women where they go out and they become each other's wing women, and they support each other in public environments. And they go out and I give them challenges, and I present them with challenges, and we get together the next week and they share how they met their challenge and how their friend, their sister, the new woman in their clan has supported them in achieving what they were so incredibly scared to do. And it really ends up being such an amazing, amazing opportunity to not just change the beliefs that you have, but to have the opportunity to do research. That's really what I base everything that I do on, research. To have an opportunity to do research, to try things out, to fail at them, to look like a goofball, to go, to land flat on your face, to pick yourself back up, to try something different, and just try it in a way that feels playful and fun and not attached to an outcome. And so it really allows my participants to build their level of confidence and self-worth in a way that they could have never really conceived of doing before doing this work with me. And finally, on the last week, I bring in a panel of men and give my participants and their friends, because they're allowed to come as well, an opportunity to ask any question that they may have of the men on my panel that they've just been afraid to ask, because it's so scary to ask a friend or a brother or a father or a husband or a boyfriend. But it gives women an opportunity to ask all the questions that they've been afraid to ask without feeling like that there's any sort of attachment to it. And what it does is that last particular session, it really opens up the dialogue between men and women. And it hits to the core of my mission and why I do this work. I mean, I started to do this because I was a doormat, and I don't want any other woman to be a doormat. There's a saying that my mentor has that I absolutely love, which I'll pass on to you, which is self-love is self-protection. And I firmly believe that. And that's at the core of my work. But my mission is really to bring balance between the feminine and the masculine. I spoke earlier about how women, in their quest to be independent, once men came back from World War II and they were burning up their bras, in their quest to be independent, they became more like men. And they dressed like men, they acted like men, they would do things like men. And still to this day, it is very difficult for a woman to receive from a man because, well, they're supposed to be independent. And so there's this unbalance that there exists between the feminine and the masculine. And the conversation that we have on the very last week is an opportunity to bring things back into balance. And in fact, the time that I allot is just never enough. They want to continue the conversation. And I typically have to say, listen, I have to close the blaze up. There's a place across the street. We can all meet there afterwards and we can continue this conversation. But it's an opportunity for women, even though they've been hearing from me, how it is that I have found from my research how men will typically react and act. They don't truly believe it until they actually hear it from men's mouths. And so it's a really amazing chance to have women's hearts soften around men, and for men to stop needing to protect themselves around women, because men are hurting too. And that's a big thing that women don't realize. Men are hurting too. And so it is my desire and my biggest desire that women have an opportunity to have and create a whole heart so that they can engage in their love and in their life from a place of worthiness. And from that place of worthiness, they are in relationship with another. Because if your self-worth is high, there's no need to cut down somebody else. There's no need to. You actually enter into a covenant, an agreement with a man where you can actually agree to hold each other's hearts for safekeeping, while each of you grow in your own individual lives and you grow together. And it's a very different model from what has been shown to us in the media, from what has been fed to us from the stories, and from what we've learned from our own mothers, perhaps. So it would be such a joy to have you participate in that if you're in the Albany, New York area. You can contact me for more information at Joelle, Joelle, at joelleyden.com. That's Joelle at joelleyden.com. We begin October 4th. It would be such a pleasure to have you there. The cost of the class is $397 for the 6-week session. It is worth every single penny. I've had women marry, move in with boyfriends, be in the relationships that prior to doing this work they were struggling in, and after this work they're thriving. But because I'm just so excited to do this, $397 is really not a whole lot. But if you're watching this video and you can, in your email, put on the subject line desire, I will give you a discount just because I'm that way. I'm sweet that way. And I'll give you $50 off the price of the 6-week series, and give you the price of $347 for the 6-week series. It is worth every single penny. You have to think about, like, what is it costing you to be in pain, to be struggling in relationships with men? What is it costing you, the amount of energy that you spend going on dates? What is it costing you to feel like you're coming home to your cat and like you're going to end up being the lady with 60 cats, like, that is found dead and like her body's rotted because, anyway, that's really bad and pathetic, but it's worth every single penny. And I have to tell you that I spent tens of thousands of dollars on myself to get this work to you at that price. And so many women, when they hear that price, will kind of go, oh, that's a little too much for me. It's a lot of money. It's a lot, $347. It's a lot of money. And I totally get that, but it's an investment. And typically, women will just, if they have that reaction of it's too much money, it's for probably one of 3 reasons. One being, well, you like the information, but I might not be a good mentor for you, or you don't feel a connection with me as a teacher. And I totally, totally get that. I respect that. We're not meant to work with everyone, right? So if that's the case, I send you on your way, and I thank you for stopping by. It could be the second reason, if you're saying the price is too much. It could be that really underneath that, oh, that's a lot of money, is that you're not willing to do the work that it would take to get the transformation that you seek. I'll say that again, that maybe the second reason is more applicable, that maybe you're not willing to do the work that it would take to get the transformation that you seek. Or maybe it's a third reason, and this is where I got stuck and got tripped up a lot. I didn't think I was worth it. And it wasn't until I committed to myself and I committed to my self-worth, and I decided that there was no price on that. There was no price on my self-worth. There was no way that I was going to go back to another abusive husband. There was no way that I was going to go back into a relationship where I felt like I was dying. Never again. It wasn't going to happen. But the money was a big thing. And it was really had to do with self-worth, which is everything that this workshop is about. So I would love to hear from you. Again, send me an email with a $50 discount with the word desire in the subject line for $347. I think you will absolutely not regret a single piece of information that you receive. So, I told you at the beginning that I was going to share with you. What time do we have here? Oh goodness, it's been an hour. Good. I told you that I would share with you a tool that I think makes a huge difference with being in relationship with men. It's actually a tool that I learned through my mentor, and that we typically use with other women, but I taught it to the men that I'm in relationship with my man on our very second date. Because the very first one, actually, we went on a walk, and he was a lovely man. And then when he asked me out on another date, um, I wanted to make sure that I was sharing with him um, some really nice things. So let me back the truck here. So here's the tool. On the second date, he took me out for a canoe ride. I'd actually asked him for a kayak ride, but I told him that I didn't have a kayak and could he help me out because I really wanted to be on the water. And he let me know that he didn't have a kayak, but he had a canoe, and he asked me if that would be okay. And that was perfect. So he picked me up. He had the canoe on the top of the car. He'd packed a picnic. We canoed around the lake, and then we sat on the grass and chatted for probably about 4 hours and had the most lovely time. And on the ride home, I let him know that I wanted to share my experience of spending the afternoon with him. And so I proceeded to, as he was driving us back, I proceeded to tell him all the things that I really appreciated and enjoyed about our time together. How he had pointed out certain flowers, how he had talked about certain topics in such an honest and vulnerable way, how he had taken the time to pack us cheese and crackers and a little wine and strawberries and something nice to eat. How I appreciated the ease of our conversation. So I went through and I probably went on for a good 10 minutes sharing with him everything that I appreciated about our date. And the next day I received an email from him. And he then shared because I think he was in a bit of shock, like so much appreciation was sort of an unusual thing for him. But the very next day I received an email from him where he shared all the things that he appreciated about our date together and about being in my company for the time that we were together. And I recognized at that moment that my sharing my appreciation with him, there was no outcome. I wasn't looking for an outcome. I just wanted to share my appreciation of him. And when I received the email, it made me realize that, wow, this is actually a really powerful thing. That he got to see the date from my perspective. And then when he sent me the email, I got to see the date from his perspective. And what it did was that it allowed us to become much more present with each other on each and every date after that. Because after each and every date, I would share my appreciation. I would share those things that I noticed. I would share the details that were meaningful to me. And what that has done for me and for us is that it has created this relationship where we pay attention to the really good things and we share those really good things with each other. And we've been in a relationship for 2.5 years. And I'm not saying that we haven't hit bumps. I'm not saying that it's all bed of roses. But because in our relationship we have this culture of sharing appreciation with one another, that when the bumps come, that when the difficult times come, that is sort of the overarching umbrella, if you will, that kind of holds the container in which we are in relationship with each other. And it allows us to see, not to so much focus on the negativity and that happened so much in my previous relationships. All I could see was the negative. I was like a vulture picking apart it like a carcass. The concept of sharing appreciation allows one to just change the culture, change the whole concept of relationship on its head to see the positive aspects of both the relationship and the individual in that relationship, and to share that with them. So I hope you'll take that tool. You can use it with every single person. It doesn't have to be a man. It can be with a woman. It could be with a child. Sharing your appreciation with them. Like ooze appreciation. It could be with a cashier. It could be with the person who holds the door. It could be with the gentleman who gives you a coffee at Starbucks. Share your appreciation. Not only will it change your own chemistry, it'll leave the person that you interact with, man, woman alike, child, feeling so much better and they're so blessed for having been in contact with you for that moment, for having been in your light for that moment. And what it will do for your relationships is that it'll allow you to focus on the positive and let that be the guiding force. Let that be the fuel that guides your relationship. So, for those of you who are interested, October 4th is when we start here in Albany, New York at the Good Karma Studio. I would love for you to be there. You are so, so worth it. So worth it. I stand for your desires, for being in a much fuller, wholehearted, trusting, loving, respectful, sexy, and mature relationship. Having the level of intimacy that you desire, I so want that for you. So it's for October 4th at the Good Karma Studio in Albany, New York, from 1 to 3 p.m. If you're interested in joining us, send me an email with the word desire and way that I can contact you, and I'll get you set up to start with us on October 4th. It's been such a pleasure to spend this evening with you and to share information. I hope you were able to take a few pearls, that you got some ahas, and that you recognize that this journey of being in relationship with another is a commitment. It's not easy, it's a commitment, and you're worth it. Have a spectacular evening, everyone. I look forward to hearing from you. I look forward to all of your emails, and I'll see you on October 4th. Take care.